Hey everyone, you're listening to the Simple Electronics Podcast. I'm your host, Dan from the Simple Electronics YouTube channel. This episode is brought to you by PCBWay. More about them a little bit later on, because with me, I've got a very special guest today. I've got Thomas from the TommyB YouTube channel. How are you, Thomas?
I'm good. Thanks for having me.
Now, I don't know you very well. I did watch quite a few of your videos. I do love the content that you're making. So can you explain to me and the audience just a little bit about who you are and what you do, please?
Sure. Yeah. My name is Thomas. My degree is electrical engineering, and I've always just been interested in hands-on projects. And it's something I've always done. So recently I started kind of documenting and filming a lot of the stuff I work on. I try to add some humor into it and just started making videos, and it's going pretty well so far, I'd say. And that's really the gist of my channel. I like 3D printing and making stuff.
Yeah, so I think, as usual, as a guest on my podcast, you're selling yourself a little short. You have made something, and I hazard to say you were the first on YouTube to do this. There may be others, but I'm pretty sure you're the first one to complete it. You have built a framework handheld, and that is the video that infatuated me with your channel to start with. But then digging into your other videos, I saw that there's more sustenance there than just that. Can you tell us a little bit about what the framework handheld is, just to add some context, and we'll go from there.
Yeah, sure. So I guess to start, Framework is a company that makes a more like modular laptop. So it's meant to be easily repaired. So for a Framework handheld, I took the laptop motherboard and I put it in the form factor of like a Steam Deck or like an ROG Ally, like a handheld gaming device. And it was just really tough to just fit, a screen and motherboard and stuff in a case that can be 3D printed and put together. I will say there are other people that have done it a little bit different than me. So I don't want to take complete credit. It's not like a novel idea, but it definitely was very difficult and quite a project to do. I think what separates my project from some of the other ones that are out there is that I made it completely integrated, like with its own controller and everything, versus some people have made like kind of laptop version or tablet versions of the Framework laptop with like controllers on the side, like third-party controllers you can buy.
Yeah, yours is literally like a Steam Deck. I think the Steam Deck and the ROG Ally, like you were saying, is the closest analog. First of all, let me just start from the get-go. Now you might get a little embarrassed here, but not only did the project end up very successful, but also your documentation of it and your video making skills ended up being really nice. So you're sort of like one of those rare double makers where you made a physical device, but you also made a really nice video. So I really appreciated that. And let's start from the beginning. So you started with a motherboard, right? You were able to buy just the motherboard from Framework?
Yeah, I bought just the motherboard. They were doing like a sale of their like previous gen motherboard, so I was able to pick up, it was like one of their i7 boards for like $300, which I thought was a good price and kind of made sense for a handheld project.
And then what inspired you to make a handheld out of it? Because I mean, I saw that very same sale. It was called out by Linus on the WAN show, and I was like, oh, okay, I can get an i7 motherboard. I think it was a 10th gen at that point, and I'm like, what the heck am I going to even use this for, right?
I think what inspired me is just like the really old idea. When I first saw the Framework motherboards, that was like kind of my first idea, and that was even kind of before the Stream Deck existed, because I've always liked like the Retroid handhelds, if you've seen those, or just those other sort of like just the handheld consoles you can like emulate old games on. And so seeing like a powerful motherboard in a small form factor is like instantly my first idea was to make a handheld out of it. So yeah, I mean, that's really the inspiration. I like playing games.
So what were your design considerations for, let's say when you were picking, I know you did something very special with the joysticks. We're going to get to that in a moment. But when you're picking the location of the face buttons, for example, and the D-pad, what sort of guided your design there?
Oh, I just kind of took an Xbox 360 controller because it's a form factor that I personally like, and more or less copy and pasted it. I originally tried to like 3D model. It's in the video. I think I talk about like I originally tried to 3D model my own controller based off of a Ghoulie Kit controller that I like, but that wasn't really working. So I had found someone's 3D model of a Xbox 360 controller and just kind of edited it heavily to fit into my design of the case.
And then for the joysticks, that was a bit special though, because you actually designed some threaded rings, right, to go over the joystick and to lock them down.
Yeah, so that was more so you could change out the threaded rings with like an octagonal shape to kind of mimic the feel of GameCube controllers, how you can like lock certain angles. Because like I mentioned before, I like emulating old games, so that thing can run GameCube games really well. So having like what feels like a GameCube controller, I thought was like important to me.
And like from the get-go, because I mean there are some open source controller projects that I've actually ordered parts, and I'm going to be building an Alpaca controller. I don't know if you've heard of them, but they're an open source controller company, or I guess project. I don't know if they're a company, but they go through sort of like a lot of design considerations. How many like iterations did it take you to get something that fits well into your hands, but also fits? I mean, what is a relatively large motherboard? It's not huge, but it's not small either.
Yeah, the amount of iterations, I don't know. I think in the video I like dumped out that box, and that wasn't even all of them. Because I basically like cut it in half or more like a quarter, so I could print out just the small piece at a time, and I don't know, like maybe almost like 15 different just like tries of something that would fit that motherboard and still feel like a controller. I was really struggling with where your basically your fingers rest on the back because it had to be kind of thick, and so it was sort of uncomfortable in certain ways. Because like the Xbox 360 controller actually bends all the way in, right next to the battery pack, so your fingers wrap around the whole thing. But that wasn't really possible with the motherboard because yeah, you said it's big. It really is, and especially the width is the problem. It's so wide, and then the ports are on the very edge. So being able to plug things into it was a huge struggle, and then have that still be like where the controller grips are, basically.
Do you have a Steam Deck at hand?
I do now, actually. I I sold my knife in Counter-Strike and got a Steam Deck just recently.
Nice. I just bought one too, very recently, like a couple weeks ago. And I bought it because Steam had the refurb program. So I actually bought a refurb one with the eMMC. It was 350 Canadian pesos, so basically free. But you know what I actually dislike about the Steam Deck is there's buttons on the back where your fingers rest around the grips. And so if you need to remove a hand to scratch your nose or whatever, you end up hitting those buttons. And more than once, I force quit Breath of the Wild because I was trying to scratch myself.
Oh, that's funny.
So, you say you do, you had to do iterative development to get the controller to fit and the stuff to fit together. And I'm sure you may have some ergonomic challenges, but not everyone gets it right. I mean, to me, those buttons on the back, I immediately disable them now because I think they were a design oversight,
I could see that.
So then so I know that you printed this in ABS, but you printed the casement in ABS, I should say, but you actually had to process it to make it a little bit smooth. You want to talk about that procedure?
Oh, sure. And this is definitely something that I'm going to say I regret it a bit. If I could go back and change something, it would be the way I did the post-processing. With ABS, I was interested in vapor smoothing, but it's not something I've ever done before. And vapor smoothing works best with like pure ABS, but I was printing in like an ABS Pro filament, which isn't pure ABS. So the vapor smoothing was leaving not a very smooth finish and then a lot of like residue in certain spots. And so eventually I kind of had to give up on that and I painted it instead. And that was still after tons and tons of sanding to try to get rid of all the layer lines. I was trying to make it look like a real, like, professional product. But I definitely, this is something I've always struggled with projects, is making them look great at the end. And I think I did a good job on this. Like, it's definitely better than stuff I've done in the past. But there's still some layer lines visible. The paint, I messed up a little bit on the back because I am not good at creating a dust-free environment. And then even the clear coat I put on doesn't feel particularly good in the hands. So there's definitely things I would change in terms of post processing, but I think sanding is a big one, and maybe just instead of painting it all, just leave it as raw plastic.
Yeah, that might be better because if if the viewers at home can pick up like an Xbox controller, they'll know that it is textured on the back, right? And so the layer lines may add some of that texturing, but I know like layer lines can be like a displeasing kind of texture sometimes. So it's a really tough call to do.
Yeah, I think next time, it's actually a thing I got comments on. I'm probably going to experiment with fuzzy skin. Especially, this is a project I'm looking to potentially do again in the future. If I can make things more modular, where just the controller part you could print separately and have that be that fuzzy skin, if you've ever played that with that in your 3D printer settings.
I have not played with it yet, but I think that's a really good idea.
Yeah, that was recommended in the comments. And so I mess with it on just some random things I've had to print recently. And I do like it. And there's also a lot of settings. You do have a lot of like granular control of how that fuzzy skin presents itself. So there's definitely some experimentation to do there on maybe like a good feeling, just straight printed product.
How did you come up with the decision for the screen? Because longtime listeners of this podcast know that I actually have all the parts around here to make my own kind of Steam Deck or frame deck or whatever you've got going on. But I was planning on using a Raspberry Pi just for retro emulation. But what I found with the screens is that the 600p screens are the most common. And if you're looking for something close to 1080, that's kind of hard to find. What did you choose for a screen, and what balance did you have to strike?
So I chose the screen based on, honestly, something that's just easily available, right? I got a WaveShare 8-inch screen. And the biggest part for me was just like kind of an ease of use sort of thing. So this is like natively supported on Windows and Linux, as it turns out. It's just generic USB drivers. It's a touchscreen. That was like one of the big ones. As well as like the WaveShare one has a lot of like screw points, because it actually is made, well, not made, but it can work with the Raspberry Pi, and you can mount it directly to the screen. So having all those screw holes to make it mount to I printed a bracket that goes in there that helps hold the screen in place. It's an IPS display, which is also a good thing. And then actually it's 800p, so it's 1280 by 800. That slightly lower resolution I was kind of actually striving for, because that'll actually make games run a little bit better, especially with, a like 4-year-old motherboard. It's a little out of date, but I was impressed with its performance, especially on the, lower display screen.
So 800, I think that's actually the same resolution as the Steam Deck. I wonder if they're using the same screen as the Steam Deck, because I'm looking at the bezels and they look very familiar.
It could be the same LCD, right? There's only a few manufacturers in the world that actually create displays, and most other companies will just rebrand and just buy them wholesale. So it could be the same raw display on the regular IPS. Well, this is an 8-inch display. The Steam Deck, I believe, is 7-inch.
Oh, true. Yeah. Okay. So that would make a lot of sense.
Yeah, but even still, it could be still coming from the same factory, and then probably a different touchscreen and then different form factor a little bit as well to fit in that Steam Deck body.
I've watched your video about a month ago, so you'll have to remind me. What kind of battery did you use for your Steam Deck? Did you actually use the framework battery?
Yeah, I used the framework battery, and I a little bit uncomfortably bent that connector around. Well, they're wires, but it still made me uncomfortable. Bent it around so that the battery kind of mounts on the back of the motherboard, and then I did do a little bit of like I put Kapton tape to help separate the heat from the motherboard from the battery, because heat can to kill the lifespan of batteries.
And is it still kicking today, or are you still able to use it today?
Yeah, I have it. I have it right next to me, actually.
Okay, but here's the tough question, though. That now that you have a Steam Deck, if you have a hankering to play video games, which one do you pick up?
So when I mentioned the clear coat on the thing, the clear coat really ruins my framework Steam Deck for me because it's kind of sticky and I don't like holding it because of that. So I've been using my Steam Deck much more.
Oh no, heartbreaker.
It is. I mean, I don't know. I used it a lot when I had first made it, and then just getting busier, stopped using it, and then I got the Steam Deck. And it's one of those things that I'm using a lot now because I sort of got it, but I'll probably stop using them both eventually because I just get distracted.
That's the way it goes. Did anyone from Framework reach out to you from these projects? Because together, the two videos you made on this, they have just shy of 300,000 views.
Yeah, crazy to me. Nobody reached out to me from Framework, but I did on the first video. Someone like made a tweet about it, and then Framework retweeted it and added me, which I thought was really cool. And then on the second video, the guy who runs the like Linux division for Framework also like retweeted my video, which I also was very flattering. But no one spoke to me directly from Framework.
Oh, that's a heartbreaker. Also, Linus from Linus Tech Tips did shout you out on the WAN show. I'm pretty sure.
Oh, I didn't know that. That would be really cool.
I don't think he he linked directly to your video, but there was a conversation that quote unquote some guy made his own Steam Deck from a Framework laptop because he is an investor, a silent investor in Framework.
I am. I do know that. But that's really cool if he shouted me out. I don't particularly watch the WAN show personally, but I am definitely a fan of his. I have one of his screwdrivers, actually.
Oh, me too. I just got one. I got a lot of shit from my viewers for that.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so something about, let's say about a third of the comments were telling me that it's overpriced junk, and another third of the comments say that it's the greatest screwdriver ever made as tested by Project Farm, and then the other third of the comments were just commenting on the video itself. So people get or sorry, I should say a third said that it was overpriced, and another third told me I was nitpicking it. That was the problem. So either I was too harsh on it or not harsh enough according to my comment section. So that was fun.
Oh, that's funny. Yeah, I think there's a little bit of truth everywhere with it. I got it as a birthday gift from my lovely girlfriend, so I can't comment on its price. But I think as far as like a regular screwdriver goes, it's definitely one of the best ones I've ever used.
I am an automotive mechanic by trade, and we have this basically all the Pro Tools, they come to your shop in a truck, essentially. They have a giant truck filled with tools. And typically here in Canada, at least, it's three brands: Snap-on, Mac, and Matco. And to get a ratcheting screwdriver off any one of those trucks, it's going to cost you minimum $100. So no matter what. And I've worked with colleagues that have bought a 7-pack of hammers for like $200. And so I'm not a stranger to the expensive tools, essentially. But when you get a tool from the tool truck, it lasts. That's why people buy them. That's why people buy Snap-on. That's why people buy the high-end stuff, and that's why like the Harbor Freight stuff is the set of sockets that you pound on with a hammer, because you don't care about them. It doesn't matter. So when I looked around the room here, there are tools that I've bought early in my YouTube career and for really cheap, and they're still here. And I'm thinking, well, if a $5 screwdriver has stayed on my workbench and I've been using it for almost every single video in the history of the channel, why use an inferior tool if I can pay, I think the screwdriver is $70 US, the LTT one. So I pay that, I'll get a better experience, and it'll last. at least as long as the cheap tool. So that's why I treated myself to a screwdriver, and then people lost their minds.
Yeah, I can see it just being controversial purely from the price, but that's very funny, and it's good reasoning. It's something that my dad always told me too. Is when you buy tools, it's better to spend more on them up front because they'll last a long time. If you're buying cheap tools, you're going to spend more money over time.
That's right. In the automotive industry, we have a saying, buy once, cry once. So that's the deal. If you buy a cheap tool, you usually end up replacing it with an expensive one in the end. So you might as well just skip the middleman.
Yeah, exactly.
So I'm actually kind of sad that that Framework didn't reach out, because I was hoping, I think you made a plea on your second video for them to send you a 7840 HS or something, but nothing, right?
Nothing. Yeah, I mean, it was partially a joke, but yeah, if they want to send me a free motherboard, I wouldn't say no. I am looking to redo the project, right? There's plenty of things that I think I could have done better. And plenty of things also, like I love when people reproduce my projects and recreate them. So, if I could make it more modular so you don't need a 3D printer with a 350 millimeter bed would be good. So, I need another Framework motherboard if, Framework's listening.
Framework, please. I actually have the 7840 HS Framework laptop. So it was a little bit closer to my heart because I paid, in Canadian dollars, it was close to $2,000 for the finished laptop. But I believe I bought it because basically I have a work laptop, which is an old HP. And if it was an upgradable laptop, I could easily replace the battery and the motherboard and keep my drives and everything. And my upgrade would have cost me like $700 instead of $2,000. So that is my thought. This is going to be the last chassis I buy. So here's hoping that once it's done, in like 4 or 5 years, maybe your design will have improved so much that I'll just upgrade my motherboard and then slap my old one into your DIY Steam Deck design.
That is kind of the idea I was like eventually hoping for. Like I said, I love when people like recreate my projects. So if people have old Framework motherboards because they upgraded, it'd be cool. They can make their own handheld from the previous stuff. And especially like the one you mentioned, that processor, 7840U, is pretty much equivalent to what's in the ROG Ally and very similar to what's in the Steam Deck, right? They're like spec for spec, almost identical. They're just sort of called different things. So it's like what your Steam Deck could run is literally what your Framework laptop could run. And so throw that in a handheld and maybe you can wind up with one with a bigger screen and play all the games you want. I don't know.
And it's literally Windows. You could yank it out of there and put it in a case and have a HTPC, or you can throw it back into the laptop case and have a mobile, like literally have a laptop. Like that's the greatest thing about modularity, is that there's really your imagination is the limit.
Yeah, that's why I am personally just a big fan of Framework, because of that. Modularity is definitely the key to it all. And that's also, again, another reason to revisit the project is I think the current Framework handheld I made kind of lost that spirit of modularity. It's very difficult to take apart and repair.
Have you gotten word from anybody like PCBWay? PCBWay is like the sponsor of my channel and multiple channels, but I'm just asking because a project like yours looks to be ideal for resin printing, and PCBWay does do resin printing. Have you been reached out to by any one of the overseas printing houses or PCB houses?
So yes, after the first video, PCBWay reached out to me, offering basically their services in exchange for like a shout out. I wouldn't say it was like a formal sponsorship, but they 3D printed the buttons for me. So the D-pad buttons and the triggers and the regular face buttons were printed in their like ABS-like resin, which was awesome because to get a nice rounded finish like I wanted, it's very hard to do that on an FDM 3D printer, like a very organic shape. So that they came in clutch for sure, offering that. So yeah, I shot them out in like the beginning of that second video, and then there's like links and stuff.
Oh, there we go. Somehow I forgot that. Mind you, it's been for the viewers at home, we chatted about this podcast about a month ago, And so that's when I watched your videos just about a month ago. So I forgot all about that.
No, it's all good.
But because I think it would be interesting, I don't know if they have the build volume, but it'd be interesting to have them 3D print you like a resin shell, like the entire shell.
Yeah, I'm sure I could have asked them. Part of me wanted to do it myself, though, right? I wanted the project to be capable of being made at home. But yeah, it was a very massive case, especially in one solid piece. And part of me too, I felt like I would be burdening them if I was asking them to print something so big, because it probably is very expensive to do. Because they probably, I don't, like you said, the build volume, I don't even know if they are capable of resin 3D printing something so large.
I think they are. So they have a full commercial facility. I actually don't think you'd be burdening them at all. They have the big industrial SLS printers as well. So I'd have to check their site again, but my rep has told me I can order CNC parts or whatever as part of the sponsorship. So maybe on your V2 or something, it would be really interesting if you can do the whole 3D printed process, because I really do understand that you want viewers to do it. But maybe as a showpiece, you can have them CNC some aluminum grips and maybe SLS nylon, sort of like a skeleton shell for like just a display piece.
I like that idea. Yeah, I mean, still print all the parts myself, but if I get parts made by someone else, I'm sure they would look really good. Especially like you said, the nylon grips I think would be cool, especially if it's more modular. If the controller is its own separate thing, that printed in nylon I think would be a good solution.
Yeah, and SLS has the bumpy texture just from its inception, like it's made like that.
Yeah, we have a ton of that stuff at work, in those big like the HP inkjet fusion whatever SLS machines. Yeah, I do like the texture that they come up with, and the parts are crazy strong.
So let's get into that a little bit, because you were telling me on the pre-show when we were chatting, you were saying that you still have to work full time to support yourself. What kind of stuff do you do for a living?
So I guess to sum up my job, I kind of do a lot of things for my company, but my main role is like an end user tester. So I'll be looking at different iterations of a product. I work in consumer electronics, so like different iterations of a product throughout its production phase, and then testing it at each phase and providing feedback. Things like catching firmware bugs is important, but also like catching mechanical issues, and then also trying to do testing from like a little bit like UI UX testing, where it's like from the perspective of the end user, like should this function this way? Like what can I do to make things as more like simpler or things like that. But like I said, I do a lot. So like my team is also in charge of like writing documentation for things. We've been getting more involved with like R&D, so like very early stage product development and things like that. So it's a really cool job and I really enjoy it. I have a lot of fun. And yeah, I mean it's my full-time gig.
Is that something you needed to be an EE for, or is that kind of you need some sort of engineering degree and the rest is like aptitude based?
Definitely don't need to be an EE specifically. Yeah, it's a lot of like aptitude based. The other people on my team, 2 of them were computer engineering bachelors. So that's basically a mix between computer science and electrical engineering. And then the last team member was just straight up computer science. But I'd say like to work in my specific role, also mechanical engineer would be fine, because half of the feedback is mechanical side. I think, my company just likes to hire engineers for this specific role. I'm not sure it matters what the specific degree is.
Well, I think, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, because I'm not an engineer, but my wife is one. But I think engineers in general, their training teaches them to think a certain way, to approach problems in a certain way, to have sort of like the base knowledge in order to attack kind of whatever problem that faces them. They have sort of like the theoretical and mathematical understanding to see the inner workings. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, that's definitely true, I would say. In terms of like the material you learn in the class, like I'm not writing transfer functions and stuff, but the way we approach those sorts of problems in class is definitely similar to the way we approach problems at my job. And that is applicable across like all the field engineers. They definitely think in a similar way, or at least like problem solving thinking, if that makes sense.
It makes a lot of sense. Do you think if this is a loaded question, I'm very sorry about it, but do you think if your framework would come down the assembly line in front of your team, do you think it'd be ripped to shreds, or do you think you've put enough consideration in your hobby for it to be more product-like?
I think it would definitely get ripped to shreds. It's one of those things that would get sent back and be like, try again from the beginning.
That's like every single one of my projects.
Yeah. I mean, that's, I'm not a full team of engineers designing a product. And like I said earlier, there's tons of things I do want to change that I didn't like. And I think maybe the things that I want to change are because I've worked this job and I kind of understand, at least in like how a consumer electronic product should look and feel and operate. Because yeah, this definitely deserves a second iteration, because I don't feel like it's good enough. But maybe that's also the sort of hubris of all makers, is they never feel like their projects are good enough.
Never ever. And perfection is the enemy of getting it done. I don't know if you've heard that saying before.
I have not, but that very much fits the bill.
There's a subset of people, and I'm saying this, I'm including myself in all this, where you'll see them, they'll be in forums asking questions, they'll be in Discords asking questions, they'll be in YouTube comments asking questions like, how would I go about this? Should I do it like this or like this? And I get emails like that all the time of people saying like, if I attack this problem, should I approach it this way or this way? And when you drill down a little bit, it turns out that their projects, these people, was all theoretical. It was all like in their head, like, oh, if I were to do a project, which way should I get started? So a lot of people get into their own heads so far as to trying to figure out every minute detail that they just don't even start doing the project. And you'll see that a lot with a lot of the coders that I have on the podcast. They'll tell me, like, people ask them questions like, if I want to code for this issue, which route should I attack it from? And then they get inundated by these questions. And then the easiest way to curb that is you say, okay, send me your code and I'll have a look at your code and I'll show you where I would make changes. And then that's when the people are like, oh yeah, I haven't written any code yet. So not only is perfection the enemy of getting it done, but like, if you hold on to that mentally, you'll never get things started, which I think is a problem in the maker community in general. And I include myself in that. So I don't know if you have any thoughts about that. Just a quick interruption to talk about this episode's sponsor, PCBWay. PCBWay has been a long-term sponsor of the channel, and I think they're a good match for my channel because they provide quality PCBs for a reasonable price. You can get boards manufactured up to 100 mils by 100 mils for just $5, including shipping to Canada, $15 US, including shipping to USA, $12 US, which is incredibly cheap for professionally manufactured PCBs. I can personally attest to the quality of these PCBs, and so if you want a circuit immortalized forever, check out PCBWay.com with the link in the description. Now back to the conversation.
I swear I was watching a like Adam Savage tested thing where someone asked him basically how to get started when you're stuck in exactly that, where you've been planning your project for so long, but now you've thought of so many different approaches and things, and you just don't know where to start. I don't know if it's just me, but I personally don't have that problem too much. I really like being hands-on. Even if I'm doing something that I don't feel like is the best way, I'm still going to try it because I think it's easiest to look back on something and figure out what you could have done better than to try to plan for it beforehand. And of course, I do plan out everything as much as I can, but I know I'm not going to get it perfect. And I think maybe that's where people or like other people struggle, is they're scared to get it wrong from the beginning. But you know, if it's a project, you can always start over, unless of course you're spending way too much money, which is also an issue sometimes with these projects. But I don't know. I think you really just got to start. Just start somewhere, and even if it's wrong, figure out what was wrong, and don't be scared to start over.
I totally agree with that. That's some wise words. I am a very iterative creator, so I use Fusion 360. I'm not super good at it, but I'm decent at it. But when you see people that have the full mock-up, the full device, the full RC car, or the full whatever, and they have all the hinges working and whatever in CAD, that is not me. I will have a general idea of what I want it to look like. I will design, what I would feel like is the crucial part. I don't know if you've played Kerbal Space Program, but there's like a root part so that everything's built off of. And so I will build that part, I will print it, and then from there I will design the next part, and so on and so on. I'm very, very iterative. I envy the people that can do it all in CAD, but that is not me.
Yeah, no, I'm the same way. That's exactly how the framework project went. I was printing parts before I even, finished anything, really. I had started with one piece of it, printed it. I knew that print I was making was not going to be as part of the final project, but I needed to see it in my hands and then, measure it all out with my physical things and yeah, iterate from there. Definitely how I do projects too.
100%. And I wanted to ask you, actually, what made you get a Voron? And not only a Voron, you got the biggest iteration of the most complicated Voron. You have I think it's the 2.4. What made you get that instead of like something like a Bamboo Labs, for example?
Because I'm a nerd. I don't know. The Voron 2.4 350 millimeter printer is honestly, I just think it's one of the coolest pieces of engineering. I love that it's open source. I think the team behind it is super talented. I watched one of the guys, what's his name, Nero. I think he's Nero the Canuck creator now is his YouTube, but he was like helped a lot with those projects. And the part specifically that attracted me to it was the flying gantry. So 2.4 specifically has 4 motors that move up and down the gantry. So the bed is completely stationary. It never moves. And that doesn't provide the most utility. I just thought it was cool. So that was why I went with that printer. And then I went with the big one because I do, especially in the future too, I'm going to print some pretty big things that just wouldn't fit on a Bamboo Labs printer. But I should also say that I did buy a P1S pretty recently, and I've been using that a lot. I got a P1S with an AMS. Great printer.
Yeah, so I love the Bamboo Labs machines in principle, and in fact, I would probably, if I look around my room here, the amount of money I spent on 3D printers, if I would have just got one P1S, it would have been cheaper. However, I'm a little scared of the closed source nature of the Bamboo Labs printers because friend of the show, Unexpected Maker, Sion, I don't know if you know about him at all, but he has either a P1S or the X1 Carbon. I'm not sure which one of the two. And he had a sensor die in the bed. And since he replaced that sensor and did a firmware update through Bamboo, like all OEM parts and stuff like that, I think he replaced 2 sensors and then did a firmware update and a recalibration and everything. The printer has not been printing the same ever since. So I'm not sure if at the factory it goes through like a mechanical compensation. I don't know if there's literally firmware level compensations for the temperatures or whatever, but ever since he's had to replace that sensor, nothing's been the same. So that scares me a little bit. Do you have any of those kinds of concerns?
I mean, yes and no. I think, yeah, you mentioned the closed source stuff. I don't appreciate that. Like I just mentioned, the open source nature of the Voron, the Bamboo Labs is very much like the antithesis of that. And especially, they definitely took a bit of inspiration from a lot of the Voron projects. Although I don't think the Voron team necessarily cares. But yeah, I don't like it being so cloud based, and I haven't had any concerns about like it permanently breaking or anything in the future. I know the community is incredibly strong with this printer, and people are already making like their own open source, like alternative firmware. And I think if it comes to a point where I'm having issues with the printer because of like specific firmware restrictions, then I would, just straight up hack it and put on open source firmware. I already prefer to use like Orca Slicer over the Bamboo Studio, just because of its, more feature rich environment, and then it being open source too. So yeah, I mean, there's definitely concerns with it. However, it's hard to argue with just how easy the machine is to use, right? I literally press print and it prints, and it's almost never had a problem. And while my Voron is great, I have to mess with that machine pretty often to keep it in a reliable state.
I mean, I totally agree with all that. Like the Bamboo, it's incredible what it can do. We're not quite at the place where a 3D printer is an appliance. It still has to be kind of a little bit of a hobby, but I think Bamboo Labs is as close as we are right now to just being an appliance. I don't know if you agree with that.
Yeah, I would agree with that. It's definitely feels like the most sort of finished product, but you definitely need to be at least a bit technically inclined to operate it. It's not, you can't like give it to a 6-year-old child and expect them to be able to work it flawlessly.
Did you enjoy the build of your Voron, or did you find a couple of the parts frustrating? And just for context, I live streamed every single minute of building my Voron V0, so I know some of the pains.
I loved building it, but that's just very much so like how I am as a person. There was definitely some frustrations in putting it all together, especially the tool head. I thought was a bit weird, and being a bit of a perfectionist, but also being impatient was, I think, probably the most difficult thing about it. Like you really need to make sure everything was square and perfect putting it together, and then sometimes I was, while trying to do that, also skipping steps in the instructions because I was a little too excited. I think was my main issue building it, but I did really like building it. I stayed up way too late for, I think building it as a machine probably took me like 3 days. And then the actual getting my firmware set up and the software all set up and tuned was probably another week. But I definitely loved every minute of it. But I know it's not for everyone.
It's like adult Lego, though. But at the end, you get, well, hopefully, you get a working machine. Whereas I'm a big fan of Lego. Like I've been buying the Chinese Lego copies because budget. But at the end, I've got a nice display piece. But my Voron, I mean, I didn't even tune it yet because you're saying it took you about a week to like tune it in. I just put it together. It didn't work because turns out the different microcontrollers on board had to be separately firmware updated in the, oh geez, what's the software called that runs Voron? Anyways, they all had to be like separately coded, and so there was a big deal about that. But once that was done, I haven't even done, like I've only tuned the filament. That's it, just the extruder. The rest is all factory tuned and it works phenomenal. So I'm pretty happy with it. But then again, the V0 is much smaller. So like when you're talking about resonance and stuff through the frame, I think it's a little bit less crucial.
Yeah, the 2.4 definitely likes to shake. It's not the most rigid frame. I think that's actually where the rat rig is a very stiff frame. And that's why they offer even bigger printers. A lot of the tuning stuff, though, was kind of on me. The reason it took so long, I was being a perfectionist with how I wanted everything to turn out, and going through. I don't know if you ever seen like Ellis's tuning guide.
I've seen Teaching Tech has a tuning guide, so I've seen that one. Is it similar?
I think so. Ellis's tuning guide is like a whole website, and it looks like it's more specifically around the Voron 2.4. But yeah, because tuning the software, I'll also include into like tramming the frame and stuff, making sure everything was perfect after it was all put together, which took me a long time. I just really had to exercise a lot of patience to get it right, and also not break anything, because I totally crashed into the bed a couple times.
Ooh, that's rough on the 2.4. There's no give in that bed. So when you crash hard.
Yeah.
But I mean, it has good points having the solid bed, because then you can use tap. I see that you've done a round of upgrades on it. You've put a screen on your hot end, which is probably a BTT product.
Yeah, that was one they reached out to me for. I don't actually have it on there anymore. I did a standalone version of that screen, the BTT Nomi. But yeah, I've done quite a few upgrades to my printer since. I have a different hot end on there, and I switched to CAN bus, are probably like the two big ones.
Are you using an umbilical now instead of the drag chains?
Yeah, it's not like the proper umbilical mod.
Okay.
But it is, yeah, just the CAN bus cable. I did get some flack in the comments I made because it wasn't really supported. So I've put like the cable weave stuff on it now, so it's a bit stiffer. But yeah, it's just no more drag chains, which I think is actually a big improvement.
That's one of my issues with you. I didn't check. I don't remember yours, but did you buy your kit from LDO?
I got mine was the LDO kit from Matter Hackers.
Yeah. So if I had, unlimited budget, that's where I would go to. But I bought mine from Cybor, and the issue with buying a pre-built kit like that is that there are all sorts of mods that are already integrated, but they don't tell you which mods. And then when you do find out which mods you have, then you have to go hunt down the instructions for that mod itself. And since you're building it from scratch, you have to kind of try to figure out, like, okay, well, what screws is this guy removing? And then which ones is he putting back and which ones is he replacing? So you kind of have to like figure out your own installation. And I know LDO has really good documentation, but even so, you might run into some issues like that too.
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah, that is funny. So yeah, when you go with those other kits, you do save quite a bit of money. But yeah, definitely running into issues like you mentioned, because the Vorons have so many iterations of the exact same one. Like my Voron is specifically the 2.4 R2, and then it's the Rev C kit from LDO. And their documentation was good, but they did do that where they included a lot of mods. They did say which mods are in there, but like the generic Voron instruction manual for putting it together doesn't necessarily have that, and it assumes you have like a basic kit, like you self-sourced it. So there was a little bit of like jumping around, and mostly it was research of the things I wanted to do. Like I had the clicky mod and stuff at first, the nozzle brush, things like that were included with the LDO kit that I know I want to add. So just researching beforehand, knowing when I needed to jump to different sets of instructions.
So just moving along a little bit, because I just checked the time and I don't want to keep you here forever. But can you just quickly explain, like, what do you get out of making YouTube videos of your creations? Because like the Voron stuff, you could have kept that to yourself. The mods, you could have kept that to yourself. But instead, you're like sharing this with a bigger audience. And at the same time, if I do say so myself, you did a really good job at making a video on top of that. So you made two products. You made the product and the video. So like what inspires you to make the videos instead of just making stuff by yourself at home?
That's a good question. This might sound like a cop-out answer, but a lot of it is kind of, for me, this might sound weird, but I like being good at things. And so I like doing things that are difficult so I can learn how to be good at them. Like growing up, I was really into skateboarding. I still like to try to skateboard, and it's incredibly difficult. It's one of the reasons I like it. And one of the reasons I picked electrical engineering as my degree is because I thought it was so difficult. And I have found that, especially from skateboarding and making videos, that video editing and like trying to tell a narrative and structuring a video, script writing is really hard for me. And it's something that I want to get good at. So since I already am doing these sorts of projects at home and stuff all the time, it just was a good fit to document it. Especially, I watch tons of YouTubers, like all the maker YouTubers, William Osman, I don't know, Backyard Scientist, Michael Reeves. I did a thing. That's a lot of content I consume. So I figured, I'm doing, in my mind, similar-ish projects at home. What if I could do something similar to what they do in terms of like, I love how, especially like I did a thing, structures his videos and he adds some humor in there. And I've tried to do that and found it very difficult. So I'm just going to keep trying, if that makes any sense.
Well, it ended up successful. Like, it definitely came across. I'm trying to look at the videos I've watched. So I've watched the 2 framework videos, the laser cutter video, the screen video, the 2.4 video, and I think they all had humor in them, and it all landed. So I think you did a good job. I think you're being a little hard on yourself, which is kind of the norm here.
Well, I do appreciate that. Yeah, I mean, you can go back further in my videos and hopefully you see an improvement, at least in terms of like the video quality and the way it's structured and the way it flows, right? There's a lot more to a video than just, right, straight camera recording. It's like, it's got to flow and be coherent.
I've never felt so personally attacked in my life.
What? That's not what I mean.
No, I'm just kidding.
I mean, I'm sure you know what I'm talking about, where it's like when you're editing your video and you're watching it through, sometimes you'll notice like awkward pauses or things, or one thing doesn't lead into another very well. And so you edit to make things flow better and tell a structured story. Or
I will tell you, I'm more apt to just send it. I'm more of a, this is on my workbench and let's take a look at it, instead of crafting a story kind of person. I have nothing against the storytelling genre. In fact, that's something I would love to do, but it's kind of hard. It's hard enough to get motivated to make videos some days that I think if I had to spend a week, sort of like refining the process, it would just not happen. So it's not for me. I really enjoy watching people who it is for them, though.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's just, it just is what it is. There's no, like, obviously, someone like Scotty from Strange Parts, we were chatting after the pod, and he's like, well, your videos could be watched by way more people if you just put a little bit more effort into it. And I'm like, yep, about that. So it's just who I am, right? I'm more of a, I think I'm just more Big Clive than Strange Parts, except I don't have Big Clive's knowledge.
Big Clive is a good example of that on your workbench style video. And I think Strange Parts too, it does an excellent job of that storytelling. So yeah, and there's definitely nothing wrong with either style, right? And I think it's definitely more efficient for that workbench style video, right? You've probably released more videos since I have, since I last made my video. It's like these take a really long time of like beating myself up and trying to get things right and writing scripts and filming and refilming, versus, I could be making more content that's maybe could help grow the channel faster if I was a little more casual with it, I guess. So it's definitely, I mean, I think that's a good way to do things too, right? You mentioned Big Clive. He's a massive YouTube channel for that exact style video.
Yeah, I wasn't trying to make you feel bad. I was this is more of a self-deprecating channel. That's all I was getting at. I'm not getting you in trouble. No. But yeah, if you're wondering, I've put out a staggering 566 videos. Jesus, I should have stopped and looked at that before.
Yeah, that's a lot. I have like 20?
Something like that.
Less than
1, 2, 3, 4. 4x4 is 16, 17, 18, 19 videos.
Nice.
But again, like, I have to say, I was really enamored by the framework Steam Deck videos. They were awesome.
Oh, I'm very flattered. I appreciate that.
So I do ask a question of every single one of my guests. Can I throw that question to you?
Yeah.
So just imagine you get a grant, a funding grant, where you have to start the business of your choice. It doesn't have to be profitable because you'd get the grant money all the time. But it does have to provide either a product or a service. What kind of business would you start?
Oh, that's actually an easy one. I've already thought of this. So, you know, like KiwiCo, right? And they sell those kits for kids. I would like to do something very similar, but more on the electrical engineering side, where kids would be more building circuits. So it is something that I actually was one of my first videos is like an RC car project kit that hopefully is approachable and can be designed in a way where a kid could do it, where they would, you know, build the circuit, put it all together, put it in a chassis, program it, because that's like another side of electrical engineering is like the firmware design, and do that. So like be able to buy kits or like KiwiCo does it, a monthly shipment. And yeah, just I think, you know, I'm not a business person. I think there's a slight hole in the market where those companies like Mark Rober's, whatever it's called, and KiwiCo, they're a little more based on the mechanical side of things. And I think we should try to spread it out a little more and look at some of the electrical stuff.
You know, I think that's a really good idea. I had Steph Piper. I don't know if you know her. She's a Australian maker, but she designs kind of easy to assemble kits, but they're very aesthetically pleasing as well. And her main market is young girls. So it's a little bit like what you're talking about, but probably aimed to a little bit of a younger age. Mind you, I guess with Scratch programming and stuff like that, you can kind of target any age for robotics and electronics. But there are some people fighting the good fight, but I think you are correct in that there is a need for a little bit more approachable kits like that. So I agree with you.
Yeah, I think that's it'd be cool because like you can buy those Arduino kits for kids, but they're not really that fun. I think it's the big problem.
There are some like what are the company like Adept and Elegoo and Elecro. I think they make some like robotics kits that you can get on Amazon.
Yeah, Elecro. They reached out to me once.
And so there are some stuff, some things like that, but I do agree with this subscription model. It'd probably be a little bit more, sort of like a little bit more approachable for parents who don't really know what to get their kids to get them into something interesting. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So yeah, I think you're right on the money with that. So essentially, if you lose your job, which I hope you do not, then you could always invest in that. Or if you get really big on YouTube, I suppose you can do your job and the a sort of like Crunch Labs for electronics thing.
Yeah, I do actually think Crunch Labs is starting to go more into the electrical side of things. So maybe this will already happen by the time I can make it happen, but that would be perfectly okay with me.
Oh, maybe the Hack Pack? Is that? I guess it's a little bit electronics, but still very mechanical engineering as well.
Yeah, I just saw they did so like their like turret thing.
Yeah, that's in the Hack Pack.
Yeah, there was yeah, where they there's like an advanced version, right, where it like tracks people and
That's right.
yeah. I thought that was cool.
It's really cool. I love what Mark Rober is doing. It just feels,
oh yeah.
It feels like he's got the scale now where he can actually have a huge effect on like young makers' lives, you know?
Yeah, I mean it's our next generation, and it's to me it's important that they're smarter than we are. So it's like
100%.
I would have loved to do this stuff when I was a kid. So that's why I really hope it you know spreads well. And
so what's the future of your channel look like? I see that the last video you released is 2 months ago, and you've mentioned that making videos takes time. Are you working on something right now, or are you still in the planning stages for your next kind of video?
I'm working on something right now. It's the project itself is done. I'm kind of mid script writing, so I'm hoping to get it out probably within the next few weeks because I just kind of have to film. I'm going to film and kind of script write at the same time, like write a part and then film it and then see how that feels. I'm kind of experimenting with different ways of how I do this. But yes, I do have something in the pipeline soon, and then I actually have some projects. I have two planned for after that. But as far as a timeline goes, I don't know. Right, I work full time, and this weekend is the first weekend I've been at home in a while. So having the time to do this is probably my biggest obstacle. But there is definitely stuff coming for anyone who's listening and potentially waiting for my next video.
Is there any maybe broad spoilers you can give us? Maybe like think of it more of a teaser, what to expect.
So I mentioned in the original handheld video that I kind of wanted to step back and focus on more one part of it at a time. So right now I'm looking at the controller part of it, and people mentioned trackpads. I got a little sidetracked with that idea of the controller with a trackpad. So you'll see that in the next video. And it is still all part of the journey of going and creating another handheld. But it's probably not what you're expecting in terms of a controller with a trackpad.
Oh, interesting. So I don't even know what I was expecting, but now even less so. But it does sound very interesting. You're aware that Raspberry Pi just put out a new micro, right? Would that be something useful for your project or no?
Raspberry Pi put out a new micro.
Yeah, so they had the RP2040 before. Now they just released the 2350, which is instead of ARM Cortex M0s, they're ARM Cortex M33s, so they're a lot faster. But you have the choice of using they have two ARM Cortex M33s and two Hazard 3 RISC-V processors or cores on board. So you can use either both RISC-V, both ARM, or one of each at the same time. And the Raspberry Pi Pico, or the RP2040, was a big deal because it had a state machine built in, or two state machines, I should say. The 2350 has a third state machine, so you can essentially have, logic gates programmable by software, which is pretty awesome.
Ah,
yeah, just a thought. I don't want you to remake your project, but yeah, it's going to be very useful for people like you that are doing like I/O stuff. The package comes in two sizes now. In the big size, I think you get 47 GPIO.
Oh, that's huge.
Yeah. And obviously built-in USB connectivity and all sorts of cool stuff. And the Pi Pico 2, which is the dev board that it's going to come on, is supposed to only cost $1 more than the old Pi Pico.
Oh, yeah, that is awesome. That was one of the reasons I really like the RP2040 is it's so cheap and so useful.
I think here in Canada, where I can't get anything for $1, I think they're $1 a piece. The RP2040, just the bare chip.
Yep, that's about how much I've spent on them. And even like the little WaveShare boards or like the Seed ones, they're like $5.
Yeah, very inexpensive. I get them right from China. Like there's a small form factor. I think it's the Stamp or something like that. It's tiny, but I think they're like $2 Canadian per board. So you get essentially a chip and a USB connector with a bonus board attached to it.
That's cool. Okay. I definitely need to put on my firmware engineer hat and learn how to be a firmware engineer better.
There you go.
Definitely cool. The Raspberry Pi Foundation does have pretty good documentation on trying to learn their platform.
And there's what I love about the Raspberry Pi stuff as well is that makers tend to flock to it. So people like me that are not firmware or software centered at all, I can always gather some info from the dozens and dozens of makers that use them in their projects. So that's what I love. There's like a concentrated effort around it, similar to what exists in Arduino.
Yes. Oh, most definitely. The RP2040 was huge for that. There was that whole Arduino core written by, right? Raspberry Pi made their own, but it turns out that the one made by the community, the early Phil Hauer's Arduino core was so much better. And it was like the community version of it. I thought was really cool. And just all that support. And then there was like the leverless controllers, which is the firmware I used for the framework stuff. Yeah. I didn't even write the firmware for the controller that's in the framework handhelds, because it was just a pre-made image that I just configured to work with what I had. I thought that was really cool.
I love the open source community.
Oh yeah.
Well, do you have any closing thoughts for the audience? Maybe you want to direct them to one of the videos we didn't chat about today, something to take a look at your channel through?
Yeah, I feel like I made a video a while ago that I was very proud of, and no one watched it. So if I want to direct people to a video, I will say it's maybe a bit different style. I didn't really make videos like this anymore, but I made a video called "Teaching My Cat How to Play Valorant," and it has 500 views. And I when I first made that video, I was just like, I'm like, this is such a silly idea. I feel like people are gonna watch this and think it's so funny, and no one watched it.
It's always like that. I have one video that has over 1 million views, and I put zero effort into it, but then I designed an RC vehicle from the ground up, 3D printed it, brought it out, like trotted through the snow to make a video out of it, and it got almost no views. So that's YouTube. But I see that video just by the title and thumbnail. It's very Michael Reeves coded. And so I don't know why it only got 570 views. It doesn't make any sense.
I don't know. It may just not be that good of a video. I think it is. But I don't know.
And what about socials? Are you active on Twitter or on Instagram, stuff like that?
Oh, not really. I'm trying to get more active on Twitter because I feel like that's probably a good place. So my Twitter should I say my Twitter?
Twitter.com/TommyBee456, but it'll also be linked in the description and the show notes, so you guys can go check that out. I do also appreciate that you spelled it full Twitter and not X, formerly Twitter. I love that you're trying to grow your Twitter when everyone is leaving.
Yeah, I haven't spread my social media presence to other platforms much yet. So maybe as time goes on, right, I should probably do TikTok. I think that's the one everyone's posting on. I could probably just, put my same shorts on TikTok.
Oh, definitely. Shorts translate 1-to-1. So you should definitely do that.
Yeah. So I'll probably do that. So follow me on TikTok at something.
Yeah. If he gets a TikTok started before this episode is published, it will also be in the description below.
Oh, thank you.
All right. So if there's no closing thoughts, then I just want to thank you very much for taking time out of your busy schedule to come chat on the podcast. And I really hope that it went as well for you as I know it went for me and the listeners.
Yeah. Thanks for having me. I appreciated the invite. This was fun.
And for those of you listening at home, I do like you to go to Thomas's YouTube channel. It'll be linked down below. I'm going to put the Valorant Cat video link in there too, but I will also put the link to the first iteration of the framework handheld. I think that video is a masterpiece, and the hardware is a masterpiece, no matter if it has a sticky feeling to it now or not. And I encourage you guys to go take a look and maybe leave a comment letting them know that you came from the podcast. And I want to thank you guys all for listening, and I'll catch you next week.
Thank you.